Yes, thanks for being there as we begin our discussion on Daybreak Africa today. And like we told you, we're taking a look at our topic that is very, very important for the time. Now, there's ample evidence to show that Nigerian universities or tertiary institutions are bedeviled by current or recurrent challenges in the nation. To help discuss this issue, we shall be taking a look at the topic tertiary education challenges and solutions for Nigeria. Underline 4, which is important. To help us push this further, we have a guest in the house, as in the person of Dr. Zaccheaus Olupaimo, is a lecturer of history at Adeyabi Federal University of Education in Ondo State. He holds a PhD in legal and cultural history of Africa from the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Nigeria. He was head of his department in 2014, 2018, and 2019. He was a postdoctoral scholar in residence at the University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania in 2017, and also at the International Institute of Advanced Studies, IIAS, of University of Ghana at Legon in 2019. He is our guest this morning. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much
being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so the topic today is important and cannot be overemphasized. Now, education is the aggregate of all the processes by which a young child or a young adult develops his attitude, is behavior which is of positive value to the society in which he lives in. Yes. Now, we cannot go forward without actually letting our viewers know from your perspective what education to you is. I really want that foundation before we begin.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Education, well, from my perspective, and probably the perspective of an educator, is the sum total of what makes a human being to actually become refined. Naturally, when each person or when a person is born, he starts growing. I did a work some years back, and what I was looking at there was the child before going to school. So one of the key things that happens to somebody when he starts getting education is that he's removed from the home setting. He's removed from the home setting, and is now placed within the structure of what we call education, where the whole entire human being in him, is the whole potentials in him or her are brought out. There are a lot of innate and very, very difficult things to be brought out if they are allowed to stay at home. Now, when they are exposed to, when a child is exposed to certain things in the school, within the school system, so many things in him that are hidden, that are hidden, that are latent, begin to come out by themselves. And this is what education does. It is the sum total of what happens to a person when he's exposed to what we call the schooling process. Let me just stop at that.
Okay, so let's take a look. Let us define tertiary education. Tertiary education too is, like for my research I discovered, is a pursuit of research for the exploration of natural and social development of a society.
Thank you.
Again, what is your outlook?
Well, I want to broaden the view of what tertiary education is, and I want to make it a little clearer to whoever is listening to me. Tertiary education is any education beyond the primary level, beyond the elementary level, beyond the secondary school level as we know it in Nigeria. So I want to see tertiary education beginning from what we used to call technical education, or technical college in those days. I don't know whether we still have it. And I want to see it as something beginning from that point. Anything beyond the secondary and primary school level, I think that is better described as tertiary education. The foundation was laid at that level, and now the tertiary aspect of it is coming in to stay on an existing foundation. And where that foundation is not properly laid at the primary or elementary or what we call the early childhood level now, and then secondary school level, I mean, the JSS and the SSS today, in those days there was nothing like that, but I think that's the way we have it now. Where any education beyond that level is called tertiary education. I think that will make it clearer to whoever that is listening to me in any part of the world.
So there you have it. We have laid the foundation for education and tertiary education, and I know Ezekiel has questions that he wants to ask too.
Indeed, I do have plenty. Over time, you know, it's more like we have peculiar challenges year in, year out as regarding tertiary education. In Nigeria, it's either from lack of funding or underfunding. And I think some time ago I had a colleague that claims it was a total lack of funding. Some claim it was more like the government tend to pay a little or no attention to the education sector. So next we'll talk about structuring, restructuring, amongst other. I think one being in the system, what then would you regard as the most pressing challenge? I know in every situation we have our challenges, minor or major. What would you actually consider to be a major challenge, and how best are we to attack this issue? And have we been moving forward as a country, as a nation over time, see, for the last two decades per se?
Well, let me tell you that all those other ones are not major. They became major. The basic problem, which I think is the major, was the poor background. You know, I was trying to define education now, tertiary education now, and I told you that any education beyond the primary and secondary level of education in Nigeria as we know it is better described as tertiary education. Now, that foundation is no longer there. From the primary and the secondary school, it's not that they are not teaching them. It's not that they are, but they are not, the foundations that are built at that point. I think there's a scripture in the Bible that says that if the foundation be destroyed, what can the righteous do? There is nothing a righteous man can do when the foundation is bad. You need to go back to the foundation, correct that foundation, and then you can now put a superstructure that is better on it. No matter how much you spend on a faulty foundation, there will still be a problem. And that's why we're having it this way. The problem begins from that point. And until that aspect, that side of the problem is solved. Now, that leads us to the second problem. That is the failure of JAMB. Failure of Joint Admission and Matriculation Board. Because when the foundation is bad, that is the primary education, the secondary education, you see, those who designed the Nigerian educational system, that you are going to be in primary school between the age of 6 and 12. They are not silly. They are not silly. If you are going to be doing something else before the age of 6, that will now expose you to primary 1 by the age of 6. By the age of 6, there are some development that would have taken place in your brain, such that some things can now stay. Now, we created a structure, and we are working against that structure. Children will enter school highly. Our pupils, they enter school, they get into primary school through the KG and the rest of it, and they are in primary 1 at the age of 4, sometimes 3. Now, those who are able to cope, their numbers now have reduced. The size of the children that cannot cope, now they leave the primary school again by primary 4. And they sit for common entrance and they enter into secondary school. Somebody enters into primary school at the primary 1 at the age of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. By the age of 8, he is already in primary 4, and then he enters into secondary school from primary 4. He did well in the common entrance examination. That's what qualifies him to go. But then he has not acquired the required number of age, and so the stage of development in him is like give a car to a 10-year-old child to drive because he's tall, because he has the body. It does not mean that his brain is mature to that level. It doesn't mean that where he needs to apply brake, he will be able to apply brake sensibly. And it does not mean that he cannot make silly mistakes. Not that if he's mature, more mature than that, he will still not make, or he wouldn't have made such mistakes. And that's where we're having the crisis. So by the time they enter into the university, when I was in the university, I entered into Ademe here for my NC in 1988, and then I began my first degree in 1990. In my class, we saw students, fresh graduates from secondary school, who are not mature enough. The way they behave, the way they reason, it was obvious. They keep maturing in the class, and they got better before the end of the program. But they became better when they went for their master's program. And even me, that I was mature, I was quite mature at that time to be doing what I was doing. I still realized that there are some things that were wrong, that if I had been given opportunity to grow a little older. So you see the problem of foundation now. They carry that to do jump. And that's why you can have a case like the one we had in the last 2 jump, I think, where one candidate has scored very high, was still manipulating her grade. Already she scored very, very high in that school, but somebody still helped her to manipulate the grade and gave her more than 300 scores. From, you know, the level of maturity was showing, and the school, everybody was saying this is the best candidate in our school. She couldn't have scored less because they knew her level, they knew her status, they knew how brilliant she was, so they could defend. But you know, they couldn't believe that she could be that manipulative too. So looking at the fact that the foundation is wrong, they now carry that to do jump. And when they do joint admission, the problem becomes multiplied. So they enter like that into the university system. And we now have, you see, when I take students in my, I used to take a course in degree 100 level course, History of Africa. And when I take it, I take them through things like, I ask them to get a book we call Common Mistakes in English. Everybody can get a copy of Common Mistakes in English. Because when I entered into when I came in for my NC, I could not even speak correct English. I could write good English, but I was not exposed to spoken English where I was coming from. I'm one of those children raised in the public primary school and public secondary school. So the only opportunity we have to speak English was a literary and debating association. We are allowed to speak any language throughout the school hour. We are not exposed to speaking English. So, and I knew that was a major problem. So, and I will still need to speak to people in English. I've passed my whole level. I have other things. Now, somebody who passed like that, somebody who entered into the university like that, may also finish if he's not properly exposed to certain things. He may not be able to see the things that are wrong until after he has graduated. He will be writing good English and be passing. And when you bring out and be sailing through all the courses, but when you ask him to come and talk, it becomes a problem. So I was trying to build in them to solve the problem I came in with, so that they will also not. So irrespective of the level at which, the level of their exposure, when I take them, I tell them, get common mistakes in English, bring it to the class, and then we use that to discuss, and then we talk about so many things. They will be bringing it, even some of the things that one feels that is correct before. Up till now, let me tell you, up till now, I still don't know the difference between the tenses that I speak. I still don't know the difference because I just speak English.
You made mention of foundational error, of course, and like it's probably said, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
I think to wonder at some point, maybe I was thinking it was more like the government's responsibility to handle that foundational error. But at some point, make it seem as if it's put a collective effort from both family, from both the teachers, the government, and all that. I tend to wonder how visible is this collective effort, you know, considering our present state, you know, family state in Nigeria. It's more like we could foretell and prophesy what's going on in every family economically in this nation. The government estates, you know, economically wise, and all this. How can we really ensure this could work out at some point?
It could work out. We do not need to think that we need a lot of money to speak to our children. You see, the problem of spoken English is not today the way it was when I was schooling. Now, the reverse is the case now. we were raised to speak good local languages. I could speak Yoruba comfortably, I could read it comfortably and without any stress. So I naturally think in Yoruba. And that's why it is good. My write-ups are good. I only be thinking in Yoruba and be expressing myself in English. So when I have to speak it, because I'm raised to speak Yoruba, it becomes difficult. But I think very well in Yoruba. Now the reverse is the case today. Our children are not raised to even think correctly in Yoruba. Especially those of us who are raised in Yoruba land. And the same thing with Igbo land, with the same thing with Hausa land. If you don't communicate well in English, it is because in your mother tongue, in your own mother tongue, you don't really have the language, the command of the language. If you have the command of the language and you are taught a new language, you will be thinking in your local language and be expressing yourself in that other language comfortably.
You know, what you just said now, I give lessons, I teach broadcasting. And what you said now is one of the courses that I've actually taken my students on, which is important. For you to write properly in a particular language, you have to think in that language. So it becomes a problem when you want to translate from the Yoruba language or any other language into English. If you think in that language, you definitely will write in that language as it were.
Thank you.
So there's no cutting. Then again, you actually made me understand something that has been boggling my mind. I came in contact with a man that has a first class, intelligent. When it comes to intelligence, perfect. We all know his academic qualification, but when he opens his mouth to talk, there's disaster. So it was difficult for us to marry or match his educational qualification with his spoken English. It was a big problem for us, but at the end of the day, we had to accept him that way because we know that he's beyond the language he speaks. We knew we had something up here, but English is not our mother tongue.
Thank you.
So he was brought up in Yoruba language. He grew up in a local setting, but he was very intelligent. Now, moving on.
Actually, based on what he said, just before we move on any further, I think so. How then would one improve the quality of education, and what role do you think accreditation, plays in this process?
One of the challenges of university or tertiary education in Nigeria is accreditation itself. Accreditation of programs. I've been part of several accreditation programs, and I see a lot of faults that are not easy to correct. They give us a very fantastic accreditation team, made up of professors drawn from different parts of the world from NUC, and they come around and they look at our programs, they look at what we have, they look at what we need, and the structure of the program, they have come to accredit have a requirement. For instance, the carrying capacity of our university, say, is like 50 students. The university is expected to generate money and take care of certain things internally from IGR. Now, this is coming from the fees that students will pay, different kinds of fees that they are going to pay, and government is going to augment. Now, government has defined where they will come in. Now, we have a facility that can only carry, the carrying capacity of our facilities, structures, is just 50 students. But because we need money, we admit 200. And so the practicals that we are supposed to do for all the students, 50 students, we now need to do it 4 times. The same lecturer that is going to teach them the thing will run a single course 4 times. And is going to run that exam 4 times too. By implication, he's going to run his marking that same way too. And now only one person will do all of those. Do you see the problem of carrying capacity? Now it is the accreditation that is expected to come and insist and cut that the carrying capacity of your structure is 20. You cannot admit now. But for us to still have that program, they overlook certain things. Because if they don't overlook it, it will be difficult for us to also generate money to take care of these facilities that we are talking about. They are the consumables you will use in the laboratories. And the money that is coming in is not enough to take care of it. So they have to allow us, accommodate us that way, so that the program can be going on. That's why we have the problem we have with law school, that some batch of students have gone to law school, some are waiting. Some have graduated early last year. They cannot move on because the carrying capacity of the law school cannot take more than a particular percentage. So law school will not break its what do you call it? Its rule by admitting
everybody.
All, but they have to break it. They have to say, okay, 20 students will come from each of the universities. Now my university has produced 100. If we are going to mobilize 20 of them to the law school part time, that means we are going to mobilize 8 them 4 times or 5 times.
Now, during our time when we were in school, we didn't have such problems.
Yeah.
My memory is you write jam. I got my jam slip at my gate.
Good.
You write jam.
Thank God.
It is delivered by mail
to you. That was
immediately you
too.
get that slip.
Yeah.
You know for sure that your first choice of university has your name.
Thank you very much.
You go and do health. You don't even need to go to the school to find out if your name is on the board or not.
That was it.
You do the required health checks that you're supposed to do. You buy your clothes, you buy your provision. Then you're escorted by your parents. You say your name, then life begins. If you're a law student, the moment you finish, you go off to law school.
That's it.
So we're talking about a myriad of current and recurrent problems.
Thank you.
When you ask the common man on the street about what they think are the problems the educational sector, the tertiary education sector is facing, they'll tell you high school fees, lack of accommodation.
Good.
Those are the then ASU strike.
Good.
When you ask on the street, you get 3 problems.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond that.
Thank you.
So, ironically, while I was doing my research, I discovered that lack of vision, reckless leadership, bad governance, inappropriate and inadequate planning, misplacement of priorities, and a host of other problems are what tertiary institutions face as challenges. So let us begin to break it down. How does vision and reckless leadership affect tertiary institution in Nigeria?
But before you answer that question, we have to go on a very short break.
All
and
right.
We'll come back. Daybreak Africa continues. Please stay.
Stay with us. Welcome back. Yes, if you just joined us, it is still Daybreak Africa. Before the short break, we were asking our guest to let us understand how vision and lack of governance or bad governance affect tertiary institutions in Nigeria, and we want to continue from that point. So we will want to find out how vision and lack of or bad governance affects tertiary institution in Nigeria.
Well, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. You see, basically, the problem from that dimension stems from the military intervention in Nigerian politics. I take you through this because I'm a historian. You see, in 1960, the budgetary allocation for Nigerian education was 6.2%. That was in 1960. And it was sustained like that through 1964. By 1966, January 15 to be precise, the military took over. Now, when the military took over, they had little or no respect for education. As of that time, the composition of Nigeria, so you can, the kind of educational policy and the kind of governance that we had from 1960 to 1964. In fact, in the Southwest, from 1951. Because from the moment the colonial government began to test them to test run whether they have what do you call it, whether they will be able to sustain independence. You know, from the end of the Second World War, UNESCO, the United Nations have started compelling them to release colonial structures, release nations that are under you. So they were actually working towards that. So by 1951, 1952, free education began in Western Nigeria, and I knew that was what assisted even my father. That was what assisted my father. He wouldn't have been able to go to school because stark illiterate from a bad background, but he was struggling through the school, and then suddenly free education came. So he completed the standard 6 in 1953. No need to struggle for the school fees anymore, and by that he was able to enter. So good governance, that was what was practiced by the Awolowo generation. They were pursuing free education, not the kind that we are doing today, that somebody will not think about the quality of education. They are just thinking about the quantity. That we are there, we are doing free education. You start giving people student egg in the afternoon, and you give them jollof rice that you just put palm oil inside the thing so that it can turn red, and then they eat it. They are excited. They are eating Maggi and they think that they are eating good food. No, they weren't thinking about providing food for them. They were thinking about giving them quality education, and that's what made Southwest to be what it is today, because the generation that followed continued like that. Now, between 1960 and 1966 January, precisely when the coup took place, there was sufficient, or let me not say sufficient, fair allocation of budgetary allocation to education. But from the point they took over, in fact, there was a year, I think 1972, 1973, 1971, 1972, 1973, it was 0 point something percent that was allocated to education in the budget. Now, between that time and 1979, by 1976, they came up, Baba Basanjo came up with what we call UPE, Universal Primary Education. But still look at the percentage of budgetary allocation. So when the views, the visions of the people that are in charge at the helm of affairs and in our governance, when their vision is blurred about education, about anything, by that time we aren't fighting any war anymore. We aren't fighting any war anymore. The money went down to 3 point something percent, even in the days of the Nigerian Civil War. But by the time we entered into the oil boom, when money was supposed to be released into education, that was when we were having 0 point something as a allocation, budgetary allocation to education. And it was like that until I think 1979, when 8 point something percent was, that was when the military exited the stage, and then the civilians took over. I was lucky to be part of the people that enjoyed the free education of Awolowo, UPN in Southwest. You see, I left primary school, and I was almost stranded. No, my father was a polygamist, and we were looking. One person will go, and others will wait.
Stay back.
So by the time I was supposed to be waiting, that was when that free education came. So I entered into the school. I would say my chair, the chair and the locker that I used in the secondary school was numbered. My book, complete set, that I used from
inside the locker.
I'm telling
when
you,
open,
everything was given to me.
There, yes.
Everything was given. It was written Oyo State Government, OYS. That was the whole Oyo State plus Osun, and a part of. Now that was the system, and I was lucky to be in that secondary school throughout that period. By 1984, when they took over the reins of government, I was almost done. And we were still having the carryover of those books. We were still able to use them in Form 5. That affected. Now that is a government that have each of us. I opened my file, my family file. My father was a civil servant. He kept file for all of us, the children.
Just my dad did the same thing.
Now I carried my file after his death in 2001. And the letter that was personally written by the Governor Bola Ige, to each of the students in the secondary school at that time, my letter was still in my file. We will go back to that letter, we read. That was a government that have something to offer.
They have vision.
Thank you. Now, funding was now the issue.
The issue.
because they now reduced from the time that Babangida took over, they now reduced the budgetary allocation to education so much that it was 3 point something again. They are taking it to 8. I think in 1979 it was 11 point something %. And that was what Baba Obasanjo came back to in 1999. It went up to 11%. Still not something to write home about, but it was better. It was better. And now the system of the economic system of the whole country was getting worse. And everything, now we are now budgeting for the military heavily when we were not fighting any war. And now we are not raising the generation. That's what led us to where we are. The universities that were built in the 60s. I was privileged to write to be part of the people that wrote ADMA history in 2014 at 50. And I did some work at that time, some interviews, some historical works for the university then, the college then. And I happened to also be part of the people that wrote something for them again these 60 years that we have just done. And I saw in one of the files, in one of the documents that I assessed, how much was released to build what we call ADMA College of Education. I think it was about 1 point something million. The whole of the structure. Olusegun Obasanjo auditorium, that big auditorium that you see by the road, the administrative block, lecture theaters, laboratories, I think, and 52 staff quarters. Everything was built from the 1 point something million that was released by the Western Region government in 1963 to build the structure. The school took effect in
now, because of time, let us take a look at, since you're talking about infrastructure right now, it's so shocking that with just that minimal amount of money, so much was achieved. Now, what about the challenges of inadequate and decaying infrastructure that we experience now?
Luckily, I worked in the provost office as an administrator. I started my career as an administrator in the provost office of that same university. And I was aware that when budgets are prepared, the management will move to go and defend the budget led by the provost then. And then when they get there, approvals were not given to repair of structure. Approvals are usually given to the construction of new buildings.
Why is that so? And what are the effects that has had on tertiary education in Nigeria generally?
Old structures were not repaired, and so you be in a class and rain start falling, water start dropping, leakages. Laboratories that are, the world is evolving. What you use, the kind of structures you used in the laboratory in 1960, you can't be using that same structure again for laboratory in 2024.
Do we still have such situation in our tertiary education?
They are there. That's why one may not be able to blame ASUU for going on strike. We are there on the stage. We see the decay. And the problem is not that there was no fund released. There was specific fund for specific purposes. Funds that are supposed to be used to, when you hear that somebody embezzled money, in most of the cases, it's not that he carried the money home. The money that was meant for buying a particular thing, he used it to do something else that he felt was more pressing. And so when they are investigating, they discover that what they asked him to do was not properly done. It was something else that he's showing for. But that was what he needs. That was his area of need. You need lecturers. For instance, in my department, I think in the past 3 years, about 4 lecturers, or two of them, I think I can remember clearly, have gone on retirement. And as they are going, no replacement. Now, if they give my vice chancellor money now to build a structure for the Department of History, and he calls a meeting of the lecturers and the head of Department of History to come and talk, we will tell him, reduce the number of students that you are bringing into history. You don't use this money to build a structure for us. Use it to employ 2 lecturers. But it's beyond him. He had to use that money to build because that money was meant for building. So the crisis is more if you do not give the university autonomy. If you give them autonomy, they have money. They can always think about what they need and spend it. Books are getting obsolete in the libraries.
Indeed, at this point, I tend to wonder how can Nigerian university be made more accessible and affordable for low-income background students? You know, I know there's a big gap. You know, as at 1960. You know, during your days and our present days. So at this point, I know for a fact again we have a what's it called student loan, but even that has quite you know, loopholes here and there. We're still trying to rectify ourselves. So I tend to wonder how can we make this more accessible and affordable.
Well, what I will call the first solution, you may not like it.
Oh, please go.
But I think I have to say it.
What's that?
Scrap JAMB.
Wow.
Why?
Let each university admit candidates. Let students go to the portal of each university, pick form, and sit for. If you can sit for 10 university exams, sit for them. Not that you sit for. Let me tell you, I am a living example of this problem I'm talking about. I did JAMB 7 times. My first JAMB I did in 1984. And I was doing JAMB every year from 1984 till 1990 when I entered the university.
And don't you think JAMB tend to help, you know, reduce the candidates?
This year alone, look at the number of candidates that sat for JAMB and look at the number that JAMB said passed the exam. Look at where will those people stay? They have to wait again till next year, buy another JAMB form. They are not sure whether they are going to pass again. If my father was not educated sufficiently to know the value of education, after the second JAMB or the third JAMB, he asked me to go and learn a trade and forget about school. I went to learn trade, but I was still doing JAMB.
I still don't get how JAMB is a problem. Sorry, Doctor.
Now, the first problem I said JAMB. Why JAMB is the problem is this. Students are only eligible to enter into the university that they are able to pick on JAMB form. 3. And JAMB has reduced this to only one university, one monotechnic and one other. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
By implication, they are exposed, they are only taking one university.
Okay.
Now, if you sit for JAMB and you did not pass to enter the university, you switch to the next institution. Now, there are candidates who are exceptionally brilliant, but who simply did not know how to use computer to do JAMB. They missed out. There were candidates that could have been very good medical students, but because JAMB had to regiment the admission, JAMB has given the university the opportunity to consider only the candidates that are offered admission. They now begin to do post-JAMB screening for those ones that score 200 and above. And there were candidates that only narrowly or by chance made mistake in their submission of after the whole thing. That we cannot count thousands of that. One of my wards many years ago came to do, he eventually went to FUNAB to do a course in agriculture. He came to my house, sat for JAMB. The center was at DME. He came all the way from Ikirun. And when he was done with his thing, he submitted. He was submitting, the thing was rolling until the system clock timed out. And that was why he could not
go to school.
So by the time he was going to sit for JAMB the following year, what is called could not merit him for medicine. So we just began to struggle here and there. He entered into FUNAB. He completed his first degree and he went ahead to do his postgraduate program in some other things. Now, some courses are now becoming like cults. If you are a lawyer, your children will gain admission to read law. If you are a medical doctor, your children will certainly get your words of anybody that is passing through you. If you want, and what we have is, I'm telling you very soon. Now, if JAMB is not there, I go to University of Ibadan, I pick form to do medicine, I fill it. I go to University of Ilorin, I pick form to do medicine, I fill it. I go to OAU, other places, as many as I can do. And when results come out, if I did not satisfy the requirement at OAU, I could have satisfied the one. But the same JAMB score is what all of them will consider.
So more or less what we're talking about now is policy inconsistency or policy somersault. There's a need for the Nigerian government to sit down and reevaluate the place or position of JAMB.
Thank you.
The question I want to ask is, we are happy for situations like this or programs like this that will highlight and bring to light some of those problems. That is why we're having this. what have you done as one in the system that has come a long way in letting government know that there is a possibility to scrap JAMB and still get the best result necessary?
Well, I wrote a paper some years back when I was looking at the trend. And you know, as a direct beneficiary of that crisis, I said I did JAMB. There was no year I did not score more than 250 in those days when I was doing JAMB. And like you said, they bring our results to our doorstep at home. At home. My first JAMB, the result was delivered to me, posted and delivered to me, including the one I did in 1990. They brought the JAMB results to me. Now, if we are able to solve that problem, phase one is solved. Now, policy somersault. The problem is the country is not consistent about these policies. If we stay there, you see, JAMB that I was talking about was even better then. There were no exam malpractice as we have it today. There were no crisis so much as we have it today. You can now understand what the problem is with JAMB. If by now we discovered, if you gather intellectuals together to talk about JAMB, you will see 60 to 70% of academics will tell you that remove JAMB. JAMB has overlived its usefulness. Bring up another body that will do something else. Not admitting is my son wanted to study medicine, and I was then at the University of Dar es Salaam when he finished his exam. So we made several efforts with a very good, fantastic JAMB score. When the admission was closed, there was no admission. Then I discussed with a friend, Professor Mapunda at the University of Dar es Salaam, and he told me, can't he come over here? I knew my time was getting up there, so I felt bringing my son there to stay there from Nigeria to Dar es Salaam, you need to first take a flight to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. There are no direct flights from Nigeria.
Tanzania. So
you go to, before you now go to Tanzania. And you know, I felt, and the school fees was $2,500 at Mbili University at Tanzania. He will not do any JAMB. They will only submit his WAEC, West African Examination Council results, to their own East African Examination Board to evaluate, and he will be offered admission to read medicine.
So, sir, as a roundup, what's the solution in all of this that we've said as a roundup, sir?
Well, if the loan thing look like a solution, one, government can also begin to think of allowing people to get access to support by merit. The government can decide to sponsor. I will not support or subscribe to an idea of free education for everybody. Let people pay for education.
But you are a benefactor of free education.
Yes.
Why would you?
You know, I told you that the problem was with the free education that we are doing now is just about the quantity, not about the quality. I told you, I was given 25 pieces of books. I read 4 literature texts in my, my Form 5. And all the literature texts were given to me. Now, the books, everything, the quality of free education that was done by the UPN was similar to the one that was done in 1952. It took care of the whole child, what you need, and teachers were also employed.
So what do we do?
What we do is, you don't deceive them by political gimmicks that you want to give them free education. Let everybody pay. Now, government can decide to sponsor like 30% of the people that by merit. Primary school, secondary school, each university, and now each of the universities. I think this was one of the proposals that was sent by the Committee of University Registrars in 1996. They can go back to that principle that memo that was sent by the Committee of Registrars in 1996. I got a copy of it from Baba Afe Babalola when he came to deliver the lecture at ADME in 2013. He delivered the convocation lecture in 2013, and that was where I got a wind of that, and then I approved Baba, and he said he will get it for me. Now, what I'm thinking about is let them get that. You see, 30% of what the government can do. If government is focusing on only 30%, I'm talking about the federal government, let the state government says they are focusing on another 30%. They are going to sponsor 30% of the children that are in tertiary education level. Now, join that together. You already have 60% of people that are in school funded. And now, the remaining 40%, people in the, what do you call it, the private sector will come in. They are already coming in. The NGOs are coming in. The individuals are coming in. In fact, my church is coming in with, when a student is finding it difficult to pay school fees, we already know this one cannot pay school fees. We call the parents, call the home, call the pastor, and then we organize, we pay up. Before you know it, we will have between 85 and 90% of students that are in school, their bills paid. And what is left will be very small. And now, open the university up for people that want to enter. Open it up. The number of students that are leaving secondary school, that are graduating, that are not able to enter anywhere, they are the nuisance that we are seeing in the society. They are the ones that want to make money, having stayed at home. You can imagine I said I stayed at home for 7 years. When I was getting frustrated, I entered into the college by prelim, and I entered for NCE program in 1987-88. And then it wasn't because I didn't have my O-level results.
You have to pass JAMB to get into school.
I have to pass JAMB to get into school. And how many years of my life was wasted? Almost 7 before I finally made it.
Wow, I wish we could go on and on talking about these issues. We've come to discover on the show that time is not our friend. But something we promise is that we'll create another chance for the doctor to come to talk more on this issue. We need to overstretch. In fact, we need to take a more holistic look at the challenges faced by tertiary institutions and, of course, the solutions that we can proffer by experience. We've been speaking with Dr. Zaccheaus Olupaimo as a lecturer of history at ADME Federal University of Education here in Ondo City. We appreciate you so much for honoring our invite.
Thank you for having me.
That's all time will permit us on Daybreak Africa this morning, but not to worry, tomorrow is another day. I am Anire. Binitie, stay safe and bye for now.
And I am Ezekiel. Okay.